Ding dong YouTube, welcome back to the channel. I'm the Jobless Coder, and today I have a little bit of an update for you regarding the process of me joining the military. Now, if you've been a fan of this show or you've been subscribed to the channel for over a year, you will know that I put out around this time last year a video talking about my desire to join the Canadian Air Force and application process, dealing with that, doing the CFAT test, how that went, and the next steps regarding my process of joining. And then afterwards, there was basically no mention or talk of it for the past year. And that is because, as you can tell, I still live here in my parents' upstairs room. I was told on the 23rd of August of last year, so that's 2021, more than a year ago, that I needed to wait 6 months to get sober, because at the time I had been doing various drugs, psychedelics, methamphetamines, the SARMs that I was taking for my other channel when I was working out. So basically I just stopped all that cold turkey. I didn't have a problem with doing that because I wasn't addicted to any of the substances. So I waited until February 23rd, which is when I reached out to find a addictions counselor who would be able to do some drug tests and verify that I was clean. For me, that was the part of the wait that I anticipated would have been the longest. What I wasn't anticipating, however, was that the other thing I had to deal with was my diagnosed mental illnesses, OCD and depression specifically. So I had to reach out and find a psychiatrist who would be able to sign off on the paperwork for that. What I was not anticipating was that it would take over a year to get one in Canada, a country where we allegedly have free healthcare. Now, there is a lot of reasons for why this delay has occurred. The biggest being that for some unknown reason, some bureaucratic jackass in government decided that it would be a good policy to have that the Alberta Health Services, which is a government-sponsored agency funded by tax dollars, is unable to sign third-party documents for other agencies or organizations. Even other government agencies such as the military, they can't do it. So the psychiatrists and doctors that I was previously seeing when I was taking therapy and taking medication and all of that, they were unable to help at all. The only way that I could have gotten these forms signed to join the military was to do it through some private service, some private psychiatrist who charges hundreds of dollars an hour to sign the documents. Because, like I said, for whatever reason, someone in government decided that it would be a good idea that that was their policy. And if you've ever had any experience with trying to register or book an appointment for a private psychiatrist, it's not like anything else you might want to do privately in terms of surgery, say for example, Botox surgery, laser hair removal surgery. You can just go on their website and fill out a form, and then they'll book an appointment or a consultation with you, and in a matter of weeks, maybe months at most, you'll be in to see someone. But to get a private psychiatrist book, you need to have a referral from a doctor. So in order to have that happen, I needed to go to the general practitioner in town to get him to find me a doctor. And the problem with that is that, well, first of all, the doctor that I initially met with, he left and moved away, as they always tend to do when I need them the most. The doctors just get up and leave, and they move. So then they had somebody else come in, and I had to book a separate appointment for them to go in, and then I basically had to harass them for a period of several weeks, if not months, to find out where my status was on that. In the meantime, I was also dealing with the addictions counselor, who, although she was not a psychiatrist and unable to sign the forms regarding my mental illnesses, was working with me to try to find someone and perhaps give me a referral notice. So they found me someplace in Calgary called Sky Psychiatry, and I went on their website, and they've got a phone number, but if you phone the phone number, it basically just tells you to go on their website or send them a notice. They don't have any, at least as far as I could find, they don't have any public-facing email addresses, so I couldn't email anybody to address my concerns. And phoning just led to some automated machine message that said to go on their website. And if you go on their website and you fill out a form, it's got a little box where you put in your information. However, I conveniently happened to notice that the box did not have my email address as a field that was available. It was just a box you put information into. So I gave them in the box of information my email address because there was no field for it in the input, and I just waited and nobody ever contacted me back. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to stand here and send fucking smoke signals to try to get a hold of these people? The other problem with Sky Psychiatry, and one of the bigger reasons that I didn't necessarily want to go through them, was that when I was talking with the office where the addictions counselor works and trying to coordinate with them, I had probably a dozen or more different phone calls with them, and she informed me initially that their fee would be about $400, and I was like, that's a lot of money, but hey, if it can sign the forms and get me into the military, I know that the military doesn't pay exceptionally well. It's not like having a top-level job at Google or Apple, but they won't hire me anyways. So they do pay $3,000 a month starting pay for everyone who enters the service, regardless of what your profession is. And then through the course of doing training, you'll eventually get different positions, and certain positions pay more. The specific job that I've applied to with the Canadian Armed Forces is called ATIS Tech, and it deals a lot of their equipment, technology, communications infrastructure, computer networking stuff. So that tends to pay on the higher level. After your training is complete, you go up to like $5,000 or $6,000, and I could eventually work my way up to maybe even $10,000 a month income at this job. Starting with $3,000 a month, $400 for a psychiatrist appointment is not a lot of money, assuming that I can actually get in. But then, on a separate phone call with the same woman at this addictions counseling office, she informed me that the rate for Sky Psychiatry was $400 an hour with a minimum of 3 hours consultation. I said, wait, hold on. A minimum of 3 hours, and the rate is $400. That's not $400 I need to pay. That's $1,200 to go get a doctor to sign 2 pieces of paper. That's fucking ridiculous. That is more money than I make in a month of work. I am working every day, all day long. I work. I'm not technically employed, so I'm not making a lot of money because there's no legal regulations behind it. I am quite literally making less than minimum wage doing what I do. I build games for a client who lives in the Ontario region of Canada, and it's fun and I enjoy it, but I don't even make minimum wage. I would actually be making more money if I was working at McDonald's, although I wouldn't be having much fun because that's not the passion that I have or what I really want to do. So I take less money for an industry that has a huge reputation of making so much money. Everybody in this industry makes so much money, I guess, except for me. So either way, I don't make enough money to move out of my parents' place. I maybe could just barely afford my monthly groceries if I did move out, and then I have no idea where money for rent would come. It doesn't exist, especially with inflation and costs going up. And so I have basically no choice but to just sit here and continue working and living with my parents until something changes. And that something changes, I'm really hoping, or at least betting on, being joining the Canadian Armed Forces. Now, when it comes to the process of getting in, the paperwork has to get signed, and then what they tell you in the military, and this is kind of the way that the guy described it to me, was that they don't want to give anybody false hopes that, oh, you're going to get in tomorrow and the training's going to be done right away and whatnot. So they say about 2 weeks to 8 months is the time frame that they give you to wait. That's over and above the year that I have already spent living in my parents' upstairs room. I've been here since the start of October, and in just a few short weeks, it will be 1 full year where essentially nothing has changed in my life. Literally nothing. No job opportunities have been presented to me. Nothing has changed. I don't make enough money to move out. I feel like I'm basically under house arrest because I'm confined in this house, in this town, where there isn't a whole lot. I mean, I can go outside. Yeah, I can physically leave the property, but there's nothing to do here. It's not like other people who live with their parents, which is unfortunate if you're young, but it seems to be more common occurrence these days amongst a lot of people under the age of 25. I'm 25 now. I just turned 25 this summer. They live in the city. they have access to amenities. They can go and spend time with their friends. I basically have not visited or spent time with anyone in almost a year, and there's nothing to do in town, so I never leave the house anyways. So that's one of the reasons I'm looking to get into the military, is to be able to get out and try to do something. The other reason is because I can have that guaranteed income coming in every month that is more money than I've made in the last basically 3 or 4 years, trying to struggle to pay bills and pay rent and buy food and everything. So the process to get in, however, has been a lot more difficult than I ever anticipated, and that's because I'm just waiting on people and phoning people, and nobody gets back to me, and trying to email people. And like I said, I can't get a hold of anybody half of the time. I phone they're gone for lunch, or nobody's answering the phone, and so then I have to go over to the general practitioner in town and book another appointment with him and sit in and tell him again, this is what I'm trying to do. I need these papers signed. We need a psychiatrist. And just over and over this reoccurring theme for basically 10 months I've been trying to do this. So finally, something has changed this week, and that something is that I finally got the document signed that I needed to. I got in, I made an appointment with the doctor, and he charged $500. So it wasn't the $1,200 that Sky Psychiatry would have charged me, but it was still a lot of money, and my mom paid for that. And you know, if it gets me into the military, then she thought that's worth it. So I went in and I saw the doctor. We met for maybe 20 minutes, and then he brought my mom in, and we had maybe another 5 minutes of discussion, and that was it. And then I spent the last week absolutely paranoid about what would happen next, because one of the things that he specifically said to me was that his recommendation was for me to be seeking therapy and treatment meaning medication, even though I told him that I've done all these medications in the past and they never did anything, and on the rare occasion they did something, it made, you know, suicidal tendencies much worse, which is a recorded effect of these drugs often, that they make suicide much worse. So he said, okay, my recommendation is that you take therapy and that. And I was paranoid because of what he would write, because I thought that depending on the exact way that he phrases it, the words that he used, and the person at the other end who's interpreting it, the person at the military recruitment center who's actually reviewing my documents, they might read doctor recommends therapy as doctor says he cannot function without therapy, which is absolutely not the case. In fact, I have a friend who is in the military. He's artillery. He's in Manitoba doing training. He doesn't even believe that I have OCD, because his idea or his interpretation of someone who has OCD is that they're like locked inside a hermetically sealed bubble. They can't leave their room, you know, and that's not me. I can leave. I can go outside of the house. I can function in quote unquote normal society. But then I wash a lot. I take long showers and stuff to compensate for it. And I'm very meticulous about order and trying to keep germs and stuff out of my living environment. So yeah, I do have OCD. I'm diagnosed. I've been dealing with it since I was born. And the other thing too is that there's no cure for it. At least there is none yet. A lot of people don't understand that about various mental illnesses, because one of the things that they said to me when I did the application for the military was they asked, oh, when was the last time, or how long has it been since you last experienced symptoms? As though, you know, you're sick or you've got a broken leg or something. And I had to try to explain to him, having OCD is not really like, you know, a broken leg or having cancer. You know, it's not, you don't just stop experiencing symptoms. You don't just, your leg is better now, or the cancer is gone now. You don't stop having the symptoms. You have them until the day that you die. At least that is what I've been told, that I will have this disease until I die, and I will experience everything that comes with this disease until I die. The difference is the mitigation that you use to limit it, as well as the coping mechanisms. And I've developed a variety of different coping mechanisms, such as wearing latex gloves. I know a lot of people ask about that in my videos. And the reason that I wear latex gloves is because I used to go to the bathroom every 5 minutes to wash my hands every time I touched something that made me uncomfortable. When I wear latex gloves, if that ever happens, I just take the gloves off, put on a new set of gloves, and then I'll wash later at some point, like when I take a shower. And so that solves that problem. Now, if it's a problem for being in the military that I'm wearing latex gloves, I know there's certain requirements for the uniform. I spent 6 years in the Air Cadet program. So if that's an issue, then I can address it at the crossroads. But I do think that I can function in the military. I do think that I would be a good asset to the military. And I hope that the application goes through. So I spent a week worrying about this, freaking out that he would write all this stuff that would make me look bad. I mean, I only met this guy for 20 minutes, and he's writing a life report about me and my history and my medical reports and stuff. So I'm worried that we've paid $500 for this doctor to essentially sabotage whatever hope I had in my life of making something of my life. So then the time came, we got the phone call that the report had been written. We went in to go pick it up, as well as picking up the other form from the addictions counselor. There was 3 forms I had to get signed, one for OCD, one for depression, and one for the addictions to the drugs. So I had to go and pick that one up after. We had to sit in the office for almost an hour because as soon as we arrived, the doctor was with another client, and so we had to wait for their session to end before he came out, and he dropped off the paper. It was 3 sheets of paper, and I read through the report, and I was absolutely blown away at the amount of information, number one, that he got into the report, given that we only spoke for about 20 minutes, but as you can tell, I speak very fast, but the amount of detail that he had and the way that he wrote it was very well worded. So I read through the report. My mom was sitting across from me looking at me, and I gave her the thumbs up, yeah, it's good. I think it's going to work. He got a few details wrong, but they were technical details. He said that I live at home with my family and my sister, my younger sister, and that I'm the oldest. But then at some other point in the document, he said that I have 2 brothers, one older and one younger. So it's well, how can I be the oldest? And how can I live at home with my younger sister if I have an older brother and a younger brother? So he got a few of those details wrong, but everything else was perfectly on point. He made it very clear that I have tried medication. He made it very clear that the medication did not work. He made it clear his rationale behind why he said that I should do therapy, being that maybe there's treatment that I haven't tried, maybe there's drugs that I haven't tried. And I know full well that the military has a no drug policy, even if they're prescribed to you by a medical doctor. It's not a matter of illegality, oh, you can't do heroin, meth, whatever, those drugs are illegal. You can't do legally prescribed drugs. At least this is my understanding of what they told me, because it changes your state of mind, and they need you to have a clear state of mind, especially when you're dealing with deadly equipment, weapons, guns, things like that. They need you to have a clear state of mind. And if so, you're taking SSRIs that is prescribed to you by a doctor, like chloripramine or Zoloft or Prozac or fluoxetine. I think I mentioned fluoxetine and Prozac, and he's oh, they're the same thing. I didn't know. I guess Prozac and fluoxetine are the same thing, but they change your state of mind. And so that was the rationale given to me by the officers when I did the application process as to why you're not allowed to be on drugs. So I take these forms, I put them in an envelope. I didn't seal it at the time because I didn't know if I had to review them with somebody. So I went over to the recruitment center, and then just like last time, they told me to go up the elevator to the 18th floor and drop it off. You knock on the glass. The guy came and he says, I will not take it unless you seal it. And I say, okay. So I sealed the envelope in front of him. I handed it over, and then I was confused as to what happens next. I told him I haven't been here in over a year, and I'm not really sure what to expect now that I've done this. And so he says, go downstairs if you have any general inquiries. So I went downstairs, and they open the door. The guy gives me a mask because, of course, the military, as I predicted correctly, would be the last institution on earth to get rid of the masking laws. Every other business in Canada has stopped doing that as a requirement. It's no longer a law that you'll go to jail if you don't wear a mask. But I knew that the military would continue doing that. Funny enough, the security guard at the door, he's wearing big black latex gloves, very thick ones, like the ones that you might see, a mechanic wearing when they don't want to get it punctured or ripped with some of the sharp tools that they use. So he's wearing big, thick black gloves, and he's got a mask on. He's the only one in the office masked. Not a single other person in there was masked. So I had to mask to enter. He was masked, and no one else is in a mask. So I go in and I sit down and was immediately... It wasn't like a wait. I immediately sat down, and then they brought me into a room immediately, and I was talking with a guy and getting more information about the process. And that was when he told me that the wait would be anywhere from 2 weeks to 8 months. So that is where it stands now with the military. I just have to sit and wait until I hear back from them. And until that changes, that's about all I have on that. Now, the other interesting thing that happened this week, I have often thought about where I would be and what I would be doing when the Queen died. I'm not even joking. That's a thought that I've had quite often. Like, oh, I wonder where I'll be. How old will I be? What will I be doing when the Queen died? I never anticipated that on the day the Queen of England died, I would be heading into Calgary to drop off an application form to join the Canadian Armed Forces. Now, the significance and the relevance of the Queen dying, for a lot of people in America, they just basically don't care. For a lot of people in Canada, they also basically don't care. And a lot of people worldwide basically just don't care. Canada is part of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is this coalition of countries that never officially separated from Great Britain. So it's like Australia and New Zealand and Canada and a bunch of African colonies and stuff. And at one point, India, before they became independent, was a part of the colony. And America, obviously, they fought a revolution and a violent war to gain their independence. And so, Canada as a part of the Commonwealth means a couple of different things. And this is where it ties in with the relevancy of me joining the military. A lot of people, they don't like the Queen, and that's very understandable. Or at least they don't like the royal family or colonialism or the institution that it represents, because maybe they're a part of a minority community, the indigenous people, the black cultures of Africa that were brought over during slave trade. So it's okay, I guess, to have some resentment for the monarchy. My resentment towards the monarchy basically stems from me being a libertarian. I don't like the idea that institutions who have great power just tell you what to do, and you just have to do it because, funny enough, I'm joining the military, yes. There are politicians in America who act like royalty, and they're not. People like Nancy Pelosi, people like Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, who they instruct all of these very strict and ridiculous rules regarding COVID policies. You can't go to a restaurant. You need to have your vaccine shots. You can't leave your house. And then they're spotted. Oh, Nancy Pelosi can go and get her hair done because she's royalty, I guess. Gavin Newsom can go to a restaurant and have a nice meal at the restaurant because he's royalty. He's part of the upper elite and stuff. I don't like that. So the fact that there are elected politicians in America and in Canada that act like they're royalty, and then the royal family doesn't really act that much royal. From everything that I have seen and everything that I know about the Queen, she acted like a basic commoner, you know? She would go and visit random people on a farm. That was one of the stories they had on the CBC this past week, was a farm family that she came to visit in, I think, Manitoba or Saskatchewan, and they were all excited to see the Queen, and she sat at their kitchen table, and she used their napkins and utensils and stuff. And it's so, like, she's not parading herself out. Or when she was alive, she didn't parade herself around like she was royalty. Meanwhile, you have politicians that act like they're royalty and they're not. Some people might know this, a lot of people probably don't, but the monarchy is of huge significance, at least from a ceremonial perspective, to military and military culture, because the Canadian Armed Forces are ultimately serving the Queen, or they were serving the Queen, now they're serving the King. The Canadian Armed Forces, which is comprised of roughly 64,000 active members and another 35,000 reservist members, is sometimes known as the Queen's Army. The Canadian military serves, obviously, the country of Canada. That's what we protect. Regiment and history and all of that ties back to the monarchy and their family. I don't know of any person who's actively serving in the military who has a disfavorable opinion about the monarchy. At least if they are serving, they don't make it publicly known. And that's probably because I would have to assume that if you come out and are like, oh, fuck the Queen and fuck the monarchy and this whole system is garbage, and you're part of the Queen's army, yep, probably would not look very good. You'd probably be pulled in and reprimanded by your superiors. If not, you might even get ejected from the military and expelled. Whether you agree with the monarchy or not, if you are going to join the military, at least in one of the Commonwealth countries, you have to understand that the monarchy is part of the structure of authority that you need to respect. I see a lot of people on Twitter that are gloating and they're dancing and they're celebrating, or whether it's, Hassan Piker on YouTube where he's making a video and he's dancing and playing music and celebrating the Queen's death. It's like, okay, first of all, that's just distasteful in general to be celebrating anyone's death. When Biden eventually dies, I don't think it would be very tasteful for a bunch of Trump supporters to go out and dance on his grave. Likewise, now that the Queen's dead, I don't think it's very appropriate to go out and dance on her grave. But even more so, it would be not viewed kindly to active members of the military. I would have to assume that if their views about the monarchy are publicly known and they're not very favorable towards the monarchy or the Queen or now the King, that they would probably get ratted out, or they at the very least, they would get chewed out by their peers and other members of the military. Because if you go into any government building in Canada, right there on the wall is a picture of the Queen. Even a lot of the schools when I was growing up, in at least one or more of the classrooms, there would be a picture of the Queen. Now, it wasn't like, we need to pray to the Queen and we need to sing God Save the Queen every day like we would play the national anthem. But it was just there throughout my entire life. It's been there as part of tradition and history. She's on our money. I would assume that even more so for people in Britain, this is like a huge loss, especially the ones who are lining up for 30, 40 hours to see the Queen in a box and just walk past for a few seconds. Like, I don't have that kind of dedication to the royal family. I'm not going to stand in a 40-hour lineup to go and see the dead Queen in a box. I never saw her when she was alive. Why would I care to see her now that she's dead? The pageantry, though, is something that you will never witness ever again for the rest of your life. There will never be pageantry like this again. Like they said on the news, the last time that a sitting monarch died and they had a funeral was 1952. And although King Charles is like 73 years old, the royal bloodline has a long life. The Queen's mother lived until she was 100 years old. So it's entirely possible that King Charles could have another 20 years left in him still. Now, personally, I am not a big fan of Charles, and that is because he is an activist. And he has publicly came out and said that he is an activist and that he needs to stop being an activist now that he is the king. Because as policy, the monarch cannot have any public opinions about politics. And that was something that the Queen did very, very well. Where a lot of people think that politics is everything, and if you don't express your political opinion, then silence is violence, and oh my God, you need to come out and Black Lives Matter this and save the planet that. It's like ridiculous. But the Queen made a concerted effort to never express her opinion publicly. She did it through other means. There was a lot of, subtleties that she would use to express her opinion. So people knew how she felt and what she thought. The thing that I find most egregious is everyone that's ratting on her for colonialism and, oh, she hates the natives and the indigenous people. If you ever actually watched anything about the Queen, she was like the most vocal advocate that the royal family has ever seen about the native culture. She came over, I think, 20 times or more to Canada. She would visit with tribe members. She would go in their teepees and talk with them and shake hands. And she didn't just come in there and beat them like people would suggest. The monarchy is a very ancient system that was set up long ago by people that did very bad things like slavery. And that's not the Queen's responsibility. That to me is as bizarre as original sin in the Bible. We say, oh, a long, long, long time ago, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and Eve sinned, and therefore all of mankind for the rest of history is now damned. That to me is just as ridiculous as saying every monarch for the rest of history, regardless of what they do, regardless of how progressive they are, regardless of how they behave, they are bad. Bad thing, because they're a part of the monarchy that 250 years ago ran a slave trade. So back to Charles. I don't like him. because he's an activist and he's a part of the WEF, the World Economic Forum. He's been to several of the meetings of the Davos group in Switzerland, and he's like a huge environmental climate activist. And I don't have a problem with climate activists if they're genuine. The biggest problem I have with climate activists is the people that are pushing so hard to end gasoline vehicles and get everyone off of fossil fuels are the ones who use the most amount of gasoline. They're the ones that are flying on private jets, burning millions of gallons of fuel every single year on their private planes. So they will be the last people to give that up. Will they tell you that your car is illegal? That's my personal problem that I have with activists that like to preach a lot about the environment, but they don't ever do anything on their own accord to help save the environment. They just force policies on you. So I really do hope that when Charles comes out and says that he has to stop doing that now because the monarchy cannot have a political opinion, I really hope that he's genuine about that. Now, I mean, as for my opinion on the Queen, I thought she was alright. Like I said, I never met her. From the stories I've heard about her, she seems to be a very humorous woman. She seemed to be very kind and understanding, especially to different people, different cultures, different backgrounds. I think they said she toured over 100 different countries when she was the head of state. She's been on the throne for 70 years. And that's another thing, too. I have grandparents who are now dead, but when they were alive, they were born and died in the time that she was the queen. There are several people who have been born and died in the time that she was the sitting monarch. And as far as we've ever lived, she's just the queen. Every single Remembrance Day, when we when we remember Remembrance Day as the victory of the war, we sing God Save the Queen. And now it'll be God Save the King. And military regiment, Remembrance Day is a huge part of the military, obviously. Funny story enough about Remembrance Day, I wanted to tell this story. When I was in the Air Cadets, we did a citizenship tour to the museum in Edmonton. And the way that it's set up is that the seniors have to plan, each person is responsible for planning one activity in the year. So whether it's the gliding day or the sports day, each person is tasked with planning that specific thing. So for the citizenship tour to the museum, that was my task, was to organize it. So my responsibility for the day was to plan everything, what we were going to eat, the schedule and how it was going to go, who were my teachers going to be, who were going to teach certain classes and subjects, and it would work in rotation. So like a group of people would tour the museum while another group of people is taking classes, and then they would kind of switch out, and then another group is having lunch at that time. And so that was my responsibility for the day. However, one of my senior staffers who was absent that day, they had a bunch of lessons that they had written up to teach. And of those lessons, one of them was about specifically Remembrance Day. And because they were unable to teach, and all of my duties were basically just monitoring the event to make sure that it went over smoothly, I was given their classes to teach. And some of them were fine. I mean, there was like classes on aviation or how engines work and aerodynamics. And that was perfectly fine for me to teach because I was already, at the time, I had my pilot's license, both of them, my gliders and my power pilot's license. So I was like, all right, I'll take over this class and teach it. What I wasn't anticipating, though, was teaching a class of the importance of Remembrance Day to a bunch of third-level air cadets, which, if you ever have experienced the Air Cadets, if you ever join the Air Cadets, you learn like day one when you're in Air Cadets about the importance of Remembrance Day. And the idea that I would have to instruct third level, like they've been in there for 3 years and they don't know what the importance or the significance of Remembrance Day is, it took me off guard. I was very uncomfortable teaching it because it seemed bizarre. It would be like going to a university to teach a bunch of engineering students about how to do multiplication. It'd be like, yeah, we kind of know how to do that. You know, we're in engineering. We kind of know how to do multiplication, right? So that was the kind of uncomfortable atmosphere that I was put into. So the class didn't go over very well. I completely botched it. I kind of just scoffed it off, like, this is ridiculous. What I wasn't expecting, however, was that at the back of the classroom, the man who was sitting there monitoring the class the entire time was from Winnipeg and reporting directly to Colonel Bannister about the event that I had planned and how it went over. And so the entire day was a complete flop because of that one class that I messed up. And so what happens is, down the chain of command, the colonel, he comes down and he scoffs and scolds his delegates because, oh, they're this squadron from Olds, Alberta, they don't understand anything. They're not teaching their students what they need to know. Remembrance Day is so significant. Everyone needs to know about Remembrance Day. So then they come down the chain of line and they scoffed at their subordinates. And so then it goes down the chain of line. So then my CO of my squadron gets ratted out for this, and the entire day is a flop. So imagine my surprise when he calls me into the office. And I'm good friends with the CEO of my Air Cadet squadron, even to this day. And he'd have a sort of, in jest, he would call me into the office, "Svensson, get in here!" Oh God, what is it now? So I go in there, and I got absolutely chewed out my ass. It was ridiculous, the amount of chewing out that I got because of this one class that I failed. And I tried to explain to them that I didn't really understand the reason why I had to teach third-year Air Cadets about the significance of Remembrance Day. But believe you me, I have never let that go, because Remembrance Day is like the most important thing. I will remember that until the day that I die. So believe me when I say that regardless of being able to join the Air Force, every Remembrance Day I will be standing there singing "God Save the King" with my hand over my heart, because that is just how significant Remembrance Day is to me. And even before I was in Air Cadets, we did the service in school, and we did it. A lot of people, they just don't go to Remembrance Day. It's in the community and they just ignore it or they don't pay attention. But I go to Remembrance Day every year because that is the significance of it to me. And if I get into the Air Force, it'll become even more significant as a result of that. And as a process down that line, that also means that there is a certain level of respect that needs to be given to the monarchy, regardless of who is in charge. And I am perfectly willing to say that while I don't like the monarchy, I don't necessarily think that Canada should abolish it either. You know, it's not like the royal family has any real power anyways, and we've seen through history that when nations try to succeed from the union, as you would call it, of the Commonwealth, it often ends in some kind of bloody conflict. Like, I mean, America had to fight a bloody revolution to gain their independence. So the idea that we can just sign a couple documents and get it done and over with, I don't really think is going to happen. Now, I mean, the way that it works in Canada is we've got the Governor General, and they're the appointee directly to the monarch. And then they're appointing to the Prime Minister. So there's that direct link between them. In Great Britain, it's a little bit different because the Queen at the time, and now the King, can have direct consort with the government official, who is the new female, I don't know what her name is, the new female Prime Minister of Great Britain. They can just have direct meetings. And then sometimes the Prime Minister will have meetings with the King or the Queen as well. I don't know, it feels bizarre. It feels weird. It doesn't feel real. I know there's a lot of people that thought that the Queen would probably live forever. There's a lot of conspiracy theorists that are completely dead wrong. They were like, oh, the Queen is a lizard and she's like an alien shapeshifter and she's going to live forever and she's immortal, because how else could she be so old and in such good health? It's like, well, it's not that difficult to explain, you know? Stress ages the body, and if you live a fairly stressful life, as I have, it shaves years off of your life. You know, receding hairlines and all that aside, if you're struggling to pay your bills, if you're being evicted every 18 months from your house, if you're ending up homeless, having to move back with your parents, if you're being unable to eat, or you're on a budget, or you're freaking out because you lost your job, you got fired, all of that stuff stresses a person. And then you might live to your 70 years, you might live until your 50 years, you might get hit by a car when you're 20 years old and die. So everyone has a different life expectancy. But the problem is that when these conspiracy theorists come out and say that their evidence for the Queen being an alien shapeshifter is that she's really old and healthy, it's like, well, yeah. If you never had to worry about whether there was a roof over your head, if you never had to worry about where your food is coming from, if you never had to worry about money or finances or a job or any of that, then number one, your life would be fairly stress-free. And yes, I'm sure that the Queen did stress about, everyone stresses about stuff. I'm sure she stressed about things, but not to the same extent that somebody stresses when they're literally starving and have no idea and they're homeless where their next meal's going to come from. The other thing, too, is medical care. You know, in Canada, we don't really have great medical care. Like, oh my God, it's great, amazing, we've got free healthcare. It's like, yeah, you want to go stand in the hospital for 15 hours to get your broken arm looked at? That's what you'll have to do now, especially after COVID, because the medical system is collapsing. But the Queen is like a private hospital, basically, that she can go to. And the royal family, all of them, they've got private dentists and private doctors and medical staff. So like the very moment that there's any inclination of something being medically wrong, they're tended to. Whereas we have to literally wait sometimes 15 hours to get seen by a doctor, if that. So when you combine all of these factors together, you know, never having to worry, never having to stress, having everything in your life handed to you literally on a golden platter, then I would assume that, yeah, you can live to 100 years old. You can probably live to 115 years old if you're really pushing it. I know that the Queen had duties, as they call them, and she was very adamant about fulfilling her duties. You know, this is the duty I have to do, but it's like the duty was like meeting with people, talking, visiting, traveling the world, going to foreign countries, going to some hockey game and dropping the puck on the ice. All these things that she did that were part of her duties. It's not like somebody will have a duty when they're like, you know, in construction and they're hauling, you know, 20 pounds of lumber on their shoulder every day for 12 hours in the blazing heat. That's not the same as duty that the Queen had. Besides that, that's about all I have for this video. I just wanted to give an update on the military and tie it into this unfortunate incident that has happened. It's unfortunate. It's also not necessarily unaccounted for. It's not like she died under mysterious circumstances. It's not like she died in she died of old age. You know, she lived and fulfilled her life and she died. And everyone has to die eventually. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Whether or not you're a fan of the monarchy. Do you think Canada should secede now that the Queen is dead? I think a poll said that 83% of Canadians thought that Canada should secede from the Commonwealth. If you're American, how does this line up? I know I've heard from some Americans who they thought that the Queen was great. They're saddened over her loss. A lot of other Americans are like, we fought a revolution so we don't have to talk about the monarchy. And then Harry and Meghan ended up basically celebrities and everyone talks about them all the time. So it's like, okay, yeah, whatever. So that's about all. Thank you for watching the video. And until then, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.